Okay, welcome to second live stream in a row. We did one yesterday. Go check it out if you haven't seen it. But today we're doing our last kind of off cycle one. And then next week we're going to be picking a fixed time for our streams. And so streams will be happening every Tuesday. The exact time will be posted on YouTube, and it'll be there. But we're going to try to pick a time that's the same time every single week for a daytime stream here in the United States. That'll be evening for those in Europe, and probably the wrong time if you're over in Asia. But we're just going to try to normalize the time we meet every week for the first part of the year, because a lot of times I do streams just kind of when I'm feeling like I'm like right this moment, and I want to be able to change that around a little bit. Today we're going to be, I just made a list of some advanced topics, and hopefully we'll have a good conversation. Hopefully we'll get some people joining the stream as well. But what we really want is to see where we can go with this, and we'll just make a conversation. But hopefully, if you're watching this later, it's also useful and split up into useful ways that you can navigate through the video and find some good information. All of this stuff will be in the description of what we talk about, and I'll adjust the title to make it represent what we're talking about as well. Cool. So, and if you are watching and you have some questions, we always do well with questions as well. If you have some other advanced topic you want to talk about, just let me know in the chat. Obviously, it's a great place to do it. But let's dive into this a little bit. Logic, I think, is one of those pieces of software that has a lot of range in terms of you can use it fairly simply. Someone starts in GarageBand and comes over to Logic, you can run it really in an efficient way and not have to like dive too deep. But the more you use it, the more you realize how much it can do. And so this is not one of those beginner conversations. It may be that some of the stuff we talk about, you're like, whoa, wait a second, I don't even know what you're talking about. So just ask questions, and we'll get to them as we go. But if you do have any thoughts or requests, then just let me know. The first thing I want to talk about has actually been around for a long time now, and I was thinking about it because of the new reverb we just got with 11, which is a great reverb, by the way. Let me pull that up real quick. So we have lots of reverbs in Logic. We have the Chromaverb, which is great, the Nverb, the Silververb, the Space Designer, and the Quantec Room Simulator, or the QRS. Plus we have some old legacy ones as well that you could pull up. Excuse me. But I wanted to look at Space Designer first because sometimes when you're trying to get the exact right reverb, it's like you're stuck with presets, or you could make some adjustments. You might not understand all the adjustments you're making. But with Space Designer, there's this really cool technique. It used to be more hidden, but now they've really opened it up and made it more obvious, which is at the top bar here, you see it says sampled IR, and then on the right side it says synthesized IR. And so that's what I want to look at just for a second, is the synthesized IR part of that, because I think it allows you to create almost any type of reverb sound that you want. And it's a really cool technique to be able to do that. So let's turn up our reverb for a second. So impulse responses, this is the type of technology that allows you to take a measurement of a room. Typically you do a sine wave sweep, where you sweep a sine wave in a room from like a speaker, and then you capture that with a microphone. And then you can use the original sine sweep and the one you recorded, deconvolve them into this measurement of a room, and play it back. You could also do like an impulse in the room itself. Some people use starter pistols, some people use balloon pops, but it's like a measurement of the room. Logic comes with this great reverb that does this, and a bunch of different impulses that they've included. They're so-so. The quality of this reverb is dependent on the quality of the impulse response, and so if they just have mediocre ones, then you have a mediocre reverb. That's how that goes. But at some point, they're like, you know what? And by the way, if you haven't seen this before, there is an impulse response utility included. Again, this is old news for most people. Okay. Lost audio for 1 second when that loaded. We're going to quit that in a second. But that, I might be clicking and popping now. Thank you. Impulse response utility. That was weird. Can you hear the clicks and pops on my voice? Someone let me know. I wonder if that'll crash everything. Okay, we might be back. We'll see. Okay, hopefully that's a little cleaner now. We just overloaded too many things at once. Is it back? Is it better, Gunther and Scott? Say better if it gets better. Okay, cool. I'll just wait and see. But that utility allows you to create the impulses. If you have like a portable laptop and an interface with a microphone and a speaker, you can go anywhere and do that. That's been included ever since Logic Pro Studio back in the day. So none of this stuff is new, really. But I find that a lot of people don't realize what the synthesized IR tool functionality is. And that means you can come in here and you have these three main parameters: the volume envelope, the filter envelope, and the density envelope. And as you make adjustments to these, you have various parameters for each one. As you make them, it synthesizes an impulse based on what you select. And so you can go through and create all of your own impulses based on what you want it to sound like based off of these parameters. So for instance, the filter, change it, you'll see the impulse changing in the middle. And it's just a really great way to go through and create custom reverbs and make adjustments. So if you're like, ooh, that's really close. What if I just pull this filter envelope down a little bit in the middle? Or if I want to have it go up. So you can see the tail extends out. So you can create like special effects with it. And then we have all of the other parameters down below. The pre-delay, the length, the size, the crossover. All of that stuff still applies, including a nice way just to do a simple reverse reverb. So if you're really into figuring out reverb sounds and you want to do something creative with it rather than just, a standard preset, using the synthesized IR is something that none of the other reverbs that we have can do. And so I think it's a really awesome option. Let's make it 51 seconds. It's probably gonna... Man, you can hear it start to build. That's cool. Turn it off. We don't need a 51-second reverse reverb in any situation in the universe, but it's kind of cool to be able to have that. You can do up to 100 seconds. And so this tool is like a reverb in a different universe in some ways. I mean, you can just create some really amazing things. The density stuff is some of my favorites. Let's flip that around. And let's change that back. Oh, I turned it off, of course. I was like, I'm not hearing anything. Some really like kind of lo-fi-esque sounds. So pretty cool. So that was the first thing I thought of when I thought of, you know what? With the new QRS reverb out, which, by the way, I've switched to using most of the time, I think that the QRS is just one of those really nice, so good. I mean, it's just so smooth. If you just want to put like a preset on, you could use one of those from the QRS, and most of the time you're going to be sitting in a really good place. That's the opposite of an advanced technique, though. That's like the simplified version. The next thing I was going to show, and I've done in the past, it has been a while since I've done MIDI effects tutorials on here, but the MIDI effects are some of my favorites. I think it's one of the areas that Logic could really expand itself because I feel like some of these tools would be great for audio tracks, and there's workarounds and there's ways to do it, but there's no real simple way to put like the modulator or the modifier on top of an audio track. But they're really cool. So the modifier, or the modulator, I mean, is either an LFO or an envelope, or both. And so these are, you can hear the modulation happening. Right, so let's switch this around. We'll put an equalizer here. We're just going to do a little boost. This is more for visual effect than anything. And I'm going to set my destination for this tool to learn plugin parameter. And I will choose the frequency. So now this is controlling the frequency. We can say I want to do less, but I want to do it up in the higher frequencies. Like a nice little vibrato, right? So subtle. Let's make it a little bit deeper by changing the gain and narrowing the Q. Let's lower this down a little bit. There we go. That's pretty cool. It's sung to the tempo, which is nice. You can also make it so it isn't sung to the tempo. One thing that I've noticed, Some people say, well, I wish, and they'll say like one of the synthesizers had like a free oscillator LFO or something that we could use that isn't just always sung to tempo and it just always goes and doesn't start over every time you push a key. Well, you can run this one that way. So it's like adding an external LFO to a synthesizer. It's really cool. So you get a lot of old school workflow with that. Here's the advanced thing that I think that not everyone really thinks about. I'm going to add another modulator above that one. So now I've got two modulators, right? This is the one that I just set up. And then this one, let's move these over. This one, we're going to say learn plugin parameter, and we'll do adjust the rate. Again, put it in the band we want to. So this adds a little bit of randomization. Right, we can smooth it out too. Or we can do more of a sample and hold function. So the first modulator is being controlled now by the second one. And we could even do a third one to control the second one, or a third one to control another parameter on the first one. We can actually create really complex chains of these effects. One thing that would be cool would be if Logic would actually be able to group these together. Like maybe have a rack where you put a number of these effects and it becomes a new effect, like a combinator and Reason maybe. That would be cool. But currently, we would just build them. We could save them as a channel strip, but that's about the best we could do with that. This is cool. Being able to modulate the modulator, which is modulating the EQ. So then the EQ is doing all of this stuff. Let's just, for kicks, add a third one. And for this, we're going to learn plugin parameter and do the volume of that. So that it goes up and down as well as left and right. It's kind of a cool sound, right? A little bit like bubbles popping. A little bit like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory as they go up to the top of that one chute, the old Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Cool. So that was my second one that I thought of when I was thinking of, what advanced things am I really enjoying right now that we could talk about? If any of you have any comments or questions, I see that there's a few of you watching. Make sure you put them in the chat. That's a safe place to write some stuff down. But if you're just listening, then that's cool too. This stuff it's fun either way. Number 3 would be the environment. This is something that I still use on a regular basis. And of course, anyone who's used Logic for any number of years is at least aware of the environment. But where are we still using the environment? That's a good question. I find, and you get there, Command 0 is the environment. You can't get there through any other way anymore. There's no menu option. And with this, there's a few places I'm still using this, and so I think it's worth talking about, if briefly, because majority of things, for instance, the arpeggiator, most of the time the transformer, most of the time the channel splitter or the chord memorizer, almost all of those I do with MIDI effects now. And so we don't necessarily have to go into the environment to set up an arpeggiator, which was not the best arpeggiator in the world anyway. But let me just give you some context, what that might have looked like. So under clicks and ports, this is our signal flow from our physical inputs. So one way we could have done this, delete that little chain there, do an arpeggiator, connect it, right? You'll hear there's no arpeggiation happening. This is one of the weaknesses. That's because the transport has to be engaged. Let's turn on, yeah. And you have to have the keys down. You can't even use the pedal. So, but here are all the settings over there. So this is how we used to have to do an arpeggiator. No fun. But still, every once in a while, I find myself having an issue with one of my MIDI keyboards or inputs. And I come into this thing and look at what this is saying. Right? Because that gives me the input. It tells me the channel, the note, and the data that's coming with it. So it's not a bad way to monitor if something's going wrong. Certainly that can make a difference. Sometimes, and I don't do this as often anymore, but sometimes I would do this here as well, where I wanted to send out the information to various places. Let's go over to the mixer for a minute. So here's some of our tracks, right? You can connect some of these via MIDI. This is not an audio connection, but you could connect some of these things to different places, and that was super useful. For me, for instance, I think what I was doing most of the time would be the physical input here. Let's get this. Come on. And let's open that up a little bit so it's easier to see. So here's the IAC driver, bus 1. This, if you don't know what the IAC driver is, it's like an inter-application connection. That's this. It's in everybody's MIDI studio setup. Sometimes you have to turn it on, devices online. But if you send data to this, then it comes out the other side into any other application. So I could send stuff to the IAC driver, and for instance, Ableton or FL Studio or Reason would receive the MIDI data that I sent from Logic. So sometimes I would send data out to the IAC driver and then back into Logic to control other tracks. So for instance, I could set up an instrument track that the MIDI would then control other tracks. We've actually fixed this issue in Logic. We don't need to do that way anymore because of the way they've hooked up MIDI routing. But it was a way to do it. So the IAC driver, I could connect this and put it to any other track. This was something that we were doing up until recently if you wanted to have that kind of flexibility. The other thing, if you're doing any sort of old MIDI capable instruments that you can send out control data, You can do all kinds of things with like faders and send the data out using all of the information on the side here. So you'd have to know more about MIDI to really do that, but there's like SysX and Aftertouch and just notes and metadata and fader data, all of that stuff. So you could, if you're using some of other external things that can accept that, this was a way some people used to, and maybe some people still do, but control like their DX7s or other MIDI capable instruments that are like impossible on the instruments themselves. So there are things you can do with this. The last thing that I sometimes do would be using the transformer, which is more advanced than the modulation stuff we have with MIDI effects. But there's a bunch of options here in terms of what we can do. Something like alternating split, which means that every other thing that goes to it goes to a different output. This would be, I think this would be a way that we could like hook up two monophonic synthesizers and make them into a two-voice instrument, which is kind of interesting. But other kind of logical things here as well. But it's nice if I have like an input. I have a breath controller that sometimes I find myself using this with, where it's like it comes with extra data and I just want to take one piece of the breath control data. So I can say, status, if it's this, and the channel's that, then I want you to fix the data byte 1 or the data byte 2 to be something, and everything else just gets sent through. If you don't understand what I'm talking about, just realize that there's a whole world of MIDI and control data and manipulating the data that is out there. And it's possible for you to dig into it and get better at it. Okay, number 3. I'm going to make one more adjustment to my sound settings for a second because it's still a little bit clicky poppy every once in a while. The next thing. Oh, okay. So let's load up an Alchemy for a minute. Right, so an instrument that has a lot of stuff going on in the stereo field. Although not actually tons. You can make it do more. I mean, this instrument is so deep. We could probably just say, on any given day, if we want to talk about advanced logic features, just say Alchemy. And everybody like shivers in their boots a little bit because it's an intense instrument. I actually did like a 6 or 7 part series a couple years ago where I went through every single thing of Alchemy. It's in my channel if you go back and search for it, but did it as a series of live streams, which is kind of fun. So people could ask questions and things. What a cool instrument. It can do anything. That's not why I loaded it up though. Because this is something that I've seen in other workstations, and it's built in a little bit better in some of the others. But if anyone's saying, just put on a mid-side thing, put on an MS thing, like what does that mean? A lot of these other workstations have this built in, but this is one of the few places we have it in Logic. Down under the processing, we can do this as a stereo feed, a left only, a right only, a mid only, and a side only. The idea behind mid-side originally, and I don't remember which came first, the chicken or the egg, but there's a mid-side microphone technique where you use a cardioid pattern facing at your sound source, and then a bidirectional or figure 8 microphone right aligned with the capsules but going side to side. And so it's 2 microphones, one aimed that's directional towards the thing, and then one that's bidirectional going side to side. And then you use an MS decoder in order to convert that into a workable stereo file. But most decoders would have like a width thing, so it uses this phase to be able to widen or narrow the sound. And so you can come up with some really beautiful things. It's great on acoustic guitar. It's great in, like, if it's in a good space. Classical style guitar in a recital hall, mid-side is beautiful. Pianos in a good room, it's great for that too. Maybe not for like pop and rock, but for many styles it could be great. So that decoder, which can make it wider or narrower, is looking at the difference between what's the same in both microphones and what's different. So when you do mid-side processing, if I do mid only, this is going to EQ everything that's exactly the same in both the left and the right channel, left and the right. And if I do the side, it's only going to EQ the things that are different in each of those. So as an example, I've got, and let me put on the multimeter for a second, because this shows you everything that's along the middle line is the same in both channels, and everything that goes the left and right would be in both or different than what's in the other one. So that looks like a thing of spaghetti, which means a lot of stuff's different. Now, the EQ is before the meter. I'm in side mode. I'm going to turn it all the way down. Well, down 24 dB. Now the line is mostly in the center, which means we just made this kind of a mono track. It's not exactly mono. There's still stuff below that's soft in there. But it's just removing stuff. It's not folding it in. It's not combining it. It just simply puts stuff out. So if I boost this up, it's a way to like act as like a cheap widener. It's not a good widener. It's not a great widener, but it's a good one. And so you can actually do that. But if you're like, you know what? Let's just set that back to 0. I don't necessarily want to boost up all of the stuff that's in the low frequencies. In fact, maybe let's make that a little bit less stereo. And let's boost up some of the high stuff, and then, you know, some of the mud in the middle just is kind of a little bit out of control. So you get to sculpt what's in the left and the right. Now, danger, right? If we do this, we should also be looking at the correlation meter. The correlation meter tells us if things are phase compatible, or if you're having things that are canceling each other out. So mono compatibility would be one thing we would use correlation for. If you were to sum this to mono, would you lose part of the information, or would it all still be there? We're definitely going a lot on the right side of the correlation, which means has a good, healthy phase, but doesn't mean we're not messing with the phase, if that makes sense. We're doing stuff with things that are different in each channel. Now, mid only. And check this out. So we're going to do side only, right? Let me think about that for a second. Well, first and foremost, you only get to process one of these at a time. If I switch it to mid, this curve is going to control the mids. It's not going to still control the sides and then additionally the mids. So if we want the mids to be different, now if I remove the high frequencies from the mids, it's going to have a similar end result of widening it because we've just pulled out the anchor point. But it's going to sound different because it's the overall levels have changed, of course. So the mid-side stuff is really cool. One thing that you could do that's kind of an advanced technique with this. Let's do 2 of those tracks, right? So these are both. Let's see. We'll leave recall default on both of them. So now I've got that into 2 different instruments. We're gonna right click and say, what do we want? Track stack. And then on the first one, with the channel EQ, I'll do mid and pull it down. And the second one, we'll do side and pull it down. It's not going to work out exactly right. So now we could actually process these individually. So we could do something with this one or that one. So now with this one, we could say, you know what? I don't just want to have that. I just want to compress it differently, or I want to delay on it. So this one was the, let's see. So the mid only, and I pulled it down. So this one is the wide one. And so maybe I want to actually add like a delay to it. Delay designer. So now that one part of the sound. So then we can build these textures of different parts of the sound, one with the part that's all the same, the mid, one different, completely different thing with the stuff that's in the sides, and it gets all added back together in the track stack. Teru, he says, hello, I've learned, this is comment I'm reading, a lot from your channel, so I'd like to share this with you. I made something kind of advanced that uses Drum Machine Designer, Smart Controls, and Scripter to cycle through the drums. That's kind of cool. Actually, the next thing on my list is actually using the Smart Controls for today's thing. But tell me more in the chat. I'm curious to see what you're thinking with that. And that brings me to the last thing I had kind of written out, which is the Smart Controls, which I find sometimes works exactly what I need for something, and sometimes I do it different ways. But because in Logic, you'll find that there's hundreds of ways to do the same thing, not for everything, but for some things, there's many things. right? So if I want to do something with a resonant filter, right? Now, some programs, you can essentially right-click on a parameter and say, hey, assign this to an external instrument or to a MIDI thing. It's like Reason is great with that. Ableton has so many controls for this. Even some of the instruments in Pro Tools have this feature, but excuse me. In Logic, we get to do things the hard way. But the smart controls are great in some ways because it lets me have these knobs. Let's see. So this is one of the knobs right here. So I'm going to click on this advanced little button, the Show Inspector. And then we have the external assignment. My CS12 is freaking out right now. I wonder why. Let me restart it. Maybe I restarted it at the wrong... Maybe I pulled it up at the wrong time. But no, it's not. Oh, okay. There it goes. Maybe. There we go. So it already has the ability to kind of connect onto some of these smart controls, which is kind of nice. So if I switch over, so this knob right here, that's connected to right? So that's kind of a handy thing to be able to have already built onto like the CS12. But say I've got something else, and I'm going to see if this works without even setting it up in advance. Here's my Gecko app. This thing, the Gecko app, runs with this little Leap Motion device I have. I've had this thing for years now. And you can still buy them for pretty cheap, usually around or under $100. They're hand controllers they're like non-touch hand controllers. And so this app, which they are still keeping current. I mean, it still works. You can still buy it on the App Store. It's really nice. So we're going to do the up-down position, fingers spread, output channel 16, right? No, 1, output channel 1. MIDI message 16. I'm going to solo that one thing. So all I can do is this one. And you can kind of see my hand up on the screen. This thing is measuring my hand distance from that device. So now I can come in here to my external assignment. Cutoff is selected. I'm going to say learn. I'm going to move my hand up and down and then turn off the learn. So now my hand going up and down. Let me move this over so maybe you can see my hand a little bit better as I do that. I mean, how cool is it to be able to wave my hand and get exactly what I want without even having to touch something? Sometimes I like the tactile. Sometimes I like waving my hand around. This learn external assignment is one of the best parts about the smart controls, in my opinion. We can do that to both of these. Let's learn for resonance as well. It says this control is already assigned to another parameter. We're going to keep both. And then we can go through there and actually, it's not like we have to. I think we can scale it, for instance, and we can adjust it. We don't have to just like let them both be exactly the same. But that's a really powerful thing. We can easily move my hand with one wave and have it map to those things. That's cool. That's super powerful. And it's easy to like just take 10 seconds and assign it to something. Because once you, let's go back and actually like record something with that, right? Now, this is maybe one of the advanced lessons for this as well. That information is not MIDI data exactly. You don't see it anywhere. When you're using this, you actually have to switch this to touch mode because it gets recorded in as automation. Right, so then once I did that, let's see, here's the automation that I just wrote with that. Let's go back to the read mode for a second, expand this out. So that's the data that I just recorded with my hands. Cool. That's cool. That's really cool. And all I had to do was plug in this device. I think there was a driver from Leap Motion that they're making for Mac OS X Silicon right now. They're still developing it. That's cool. Oh, did I not switch back? I didn't switch back. No, I did. Just catching up with my stream. Okay, cool. That driver, plug this in, and then buy the Gecko app for like 10 or 15 bucks. Everything worked. No troubleshooting, no like weird setups. That was another one of my favorite parts. For a while, this device was, I thought it was going to be obsolete because that company it's like one of those companies that builds something and then tries to sell it. You may have seen the new thing from, oh man, which company is that? Rhodes. They've got something very similar to that. And in fact, they might have licensed the parts of this device and the code of their software just with a different implementation on top, because I think I've seen a couple images that look just like that. So it's kind of interesting. Let me catch up with Ter Yui's comment. Smart controls are super underrated. I get a lot out of them when hunting for tones in Amp Designer. They're good for controlling remix effects too. Makes sense. And Plastidon, I wonder, usually when I do 2 streams in 2 days, the notifications are different. So you have to make sure that the notification for all things is turned on. But starting next week, we're going to be we're going to do 1 stream on Tuesday at the same time every week. And then we're going to do 1 evening song night every week as well. So 2 streams a week. The daytime one on Tuesday will be at the set time. And then the one in the evening will be whenever I escape. Yeah, so I think it's just because I did a stream yesterday and it was slightly less than 24 hours before I did the next one. Then it doesn't always notify everybody. So that's not on you as much. But starting next week, we're going to be on a set schedule, so that anybody who wants to do the streams or view them can show up and know when they're going to be. Cool. Well, those were the let's see, those were the 5 advanced things I had written down in my notes to talk about today. For those of you who are watching, if you have any specific questions or feature questions, obviously if you're like, man, I've got this bug, it's like I'm not going to be able to help you with your bugs as much. So I haven't found any bugs with my own stuff plastered on at all. This thing, since I installed 11.1.2, the stuff that should be working is working. And the stuff that other people are having issues with, I'm 95% sure that they are third-party related to things that I just don't have or use. And so that's on them. I can't fix the things that are bugs based on third-party things. My recommendation for anyone who's saying that their Logic is quitting, Pro Tools, that's the one that usually quits for me. For those who are having issues with Pro Tools, you should switch to Logic. And for those of you having problems with Logic, you should uninstall everything. I'm about to sneeze, I think. Oof. Clean wipe your computer. Do a fresh install of Logic and only install the third-party things you absolutely need. It's like people need to stop with this thing where they can do that people need to stop with this gear lust where they just want every plugin and they think they need to have them all in there. That is not the right approach. Some of the greatest music in the world was made with limited resources. So find the things you actually need and install those. OGI or Ogi is asking if there's a way to smooth out recorded automation. Oh man, I haven't done that in a while. So in the old days, I kid you not, in the early days of software, we had to thin our automation all the time because it was one of the biggest resource hogs on the computers, and the computers were limited. And so we had to do that so much. I don't actually do that very much anymore. If I need to, I can manually do it. I mean, you can manually use the pencil tool. But it's like most of the time I try to just let it go and just let it be its thing. But I can't remember if there is a setting or not. Let me think if there is. No, I don't know if there is one in Logic. I think in Pro Tools there's a thin automation mode. Anybody else remember? Put it in the chat, but I don't, aside from just simplifying it, I am not good with JavaScript. I mean, I'm okay with JavaScript. I understand JavaScript. Plastodon says, after it shows a list of what's loaded, there's a yellow triangle that says there's an issue with mine, but don't tell me what. I actually have one that's like that too. So when you go into your actual plugin manager, the ones that have an issue should show up in here as having an issue. So this is the one, there's a failed validation for those two. And you can do a compatibility filter, just filter by compatibility, and you'll see I've got 2 KQ Dixies. That's my DX7 one. That there's I think those are the iPad versions, and then there's one other one they have. Then the System 8 and the Xenology, I haven't gotten to fully work from Roland. But I have those turned off. But they still pop up as failed every time. There might be something else that's triggering it too, but it usually should show you in this list. And Tara Yui, you're asking about JavaScript. So one of the things that I'm really interested in, my CS12 is having some issues right this second. So I turned it off. One thing that I did a video about sometime the last part of last year was about ChatGPT, and I think there's some other ones now of those models that are really good at coding. So you can actually really relatively easily, if you have the paid version of ChatGPT, especially the free one is it doesn't handle long enough code. But you could copy all of like a code for the scripter, for instance. So that's a MIDI effects. And, the code here, if we load up something like a probability gate, you could select this, put it into a document, upload it into ChatGPT or one of the others that does code, maybe even better, and say, hey, I've got this JavaScript for Logic Pro for this music software. Can you change and then tell it what you want to have implemented in this thing? And it can do it. So it's done it for a few different things. I had it, let me think if I can. Oh yeah, the drum kit designer remapper with velocity. This is one that I changed. So this is a custom one made by me and ChatGPT that allows me to put in, here's the actual notes. And then I put in velocity sliders for each of the notes so that I can adjust the velocity. That's cool. I mean, it's super handy. I want to get to the point where I can figure out how to give it a document and say, hey, here's the protocol. Here's all the ways that Logic is expecting JavaScript to interface with it. Take that knowledge. Here's what I want you to build from it, and then have it build the whole thing. We're not far away from it. As they say, these language models, which can code, are the worst that they're probably ever going to be. And so anytime it does it, it almost gets it right. I think, you know what? We're as close to that as we are to getting new genres for the drummer in Logic. Could be weeks, could be years. Who knows? Okay, other questions or anything before we're about to hit our hour mark? And that's about all I can handle. You do have to do some trial and error sometimes, Teriyui, because it's not always, the results are not consistent. So sometimes you have to be clever. And then OG says, ChatGPT 01 model works really well for Jenner. I think that's the one I was using when I did the last thing. But in Plastodon, we do not want a Logic AI singer. Actually, we totally do. I do. Are you kidding? It'd be cool. But to have the deep control as well. So it's not something where you just go in there and say, hey, make me something, and you just let it, eject the final product. But I wouldn't mind having the simplified version and then the depth to go in as an artist, producer, and actually make all the parts that I want. That'd be cool. Yeah, anytime you say there's a hardware unit called Misha from Eventide, if ChatGPT could pull that off, it'd be amazing. I mean, We're a long way away from specific things like that happening, but it's like, why not expect the most? Plastodon says, I like Synthesizer V, but I still find it too complex. Yeah, you know what? That's just a matter of time, in my opinion. Logic is complex, but you can use it. And I think that if you incorporate a little usage of it every day and get a couple of heavy projects on it, you'll find that it's actually really, the complexities are there to help you accomplish what you want. And so I think that part is kind of nice. I need to do some more videos on Synthesizer V. It's one of those tools that I've used in the background now for a while. And partially because I wanted to do more videos. My videos that I do on that tend to do pretty well. But it's, kind of a niche thing. So I don't, I like to get back to the basics or logic related things most of the time and then go off on tangents like that sometimes. I use VocalFlex from Dreamtonics all the time. I've used it a lot recently. Jerotone says, is it possible to keep the parameter info box always closed? You're talking about this stuff over here? Is that what you're talking about? I don't know if it's possible to always keep it closed, but you can always save it as a screen set and just get back to it with a push of a number key. And Plastodon says, I'm struggling to create songs. I noodle too much. Yeah, I think everybody has that kind of thing. And Jerotone, I don't think there's a way to just lock it closed. No. It's going to be a choice you have to keep on making. Although you could save your templates, like your base templates, to do it. But that's a choice you have to make at the very beginning of your templates. Plastodon, maybe one of the first things we should start in the next couple weeks is a song finishing competition workshop on the channel. I've had a number of people ask about that, set some parameters, get people to write songs. Maybe I'm going to think of something for that next week. I think it's time. I think it's time to pull the plug on this. Thanks everybody for watching. Some of you have been here for most of the time, and that's awesome. Like I said, look for next week on Tuesday. We're going to be starting it up with a more consistent live stream once a week during the day, and then something at some songwriting stuff in the evenings, and then I'm probably going to do a one canned video where it's not a live stream every week. So we're going to try to get some content in 2025, help people really maximize their use of Logic and have fun with it. But thanks for watching. I will catch you all later.